Yes.
Okay, does this sound right? Okay, it just sounds weird to me, so I'm just in order here. Just start with this suitcase, and when it's done, start the next one, if that's okay. Okay, so I am not an expert quilter. If you know me, you know that I just do what I like and I figure it out, and that's just kind of how I work. So I thought for today, because I'm not like an expert in one thing or another, I thought, you know what? We are all quilters in transition, right? We all start somewhere and we learn something and we move on to the next place. So what you're getting from me today is my quilting transition, my life as a quilter. So if you know me and my family, you know that I grew up amongst sewers. My mom was a sewer, my aunts are sewers. When I was small, it was clothes. I remember them sewing me my clothes. Quilting kind of came in a little bit later. But I was a little girl that my mom said, have at the scrap bag. She had this bag of scraps. I could do whatever I wanted with those. And she let me do whatever I wanted on the serger. Which I'm thinking now, I'm like, was that safer than a sewing machine? I'm not sure. But my Barbie dolls were amazing. You should have seen the things that I came up with for my Barbie dolls to wear. So my first quilt, you guys can go ahead and hold this up. I was about 13 years old when I got to have my own bedroom for the first time. And it was like decorated. We had wallpaper. We picked out the colors for the quilt. And I did not make this quilt all on my own. My mom did lots of it, but she taught me how to sew the little flower garden patches together. And so she did some, I sewed some, we worked on it together. But the big rule was she would let me sew the patches, but she didn't trust me to sew those down, I know now it's called applique. I didn't know what it was back then. But she would go to work and they're sitting there and they weren't done. And so I just said, whatever. And I just did it anyway. So if you look really closely, you can tell which one was the 13-year-old that whip stitched those blocks down. But I guess they need you to come this way for the camera. Sorry. I can stand off to the side. Hey, right? Is it perfect? No. It was hand quilted by a group of family members. My grandma, my mom, my aunts, my cousins. Some of us had never used a needle before. And it's kind of coming apart in places, but it's my first experience on a quilt. So, yeah, and we didn't know it was a complicated one. It was just we saw it in a book and we made it. And I don't care what order they're in. You can just pile them on the table, and yeah, that doesn't matter. So my next experience with a quilt was a situation where it was in a quilt book of my mom's. And I decided I was going to make this and I was going to give it to my friend for her birthday. And I was probably about 14. My mom wouldn't let me. By the time I was done with it, she said, you're not giving that away. And my mom hung that on her wall for a long time. But if you look really closely at it, my checkerboards do not match. My poor little girl right here, she's got a little top hat because my seams weren't exactly right, but that's okay. I hand quilted it myself too when I was 14. It's still loved and treasured, even though it's not perfect. And then the next thing that I have to show, in my church when you're a teenager, we did these 40-hour projects. And my 40-hour project was I made 2 of these for my older siblings that were having babies. And so I designed it myself, and I had this little melting thingy that I made my own stencils with, and then I hand quilted it myself too. Except for the last one, I got to the very end and I was running out of time, and my mom did help me so that we would finish it in time before the baby was born. Okay, so the next quilt that I have, I had kind of a little break. I started a family and I was going to college. And I started this quilt when I was expecting my first baby. But you know how life gets. I didn't finish it until my second baby was born. But again, I hand quilted this one myself and I followed the directions in a pattern, even though I didn't really have a lot of experience. And it hung on the wall in my baby's room until my babies stopped being babies. So it was the decoration on the wall in my baby's nursery. Oh, and I brought this one because sometimes we get a little bit too concerned with fancy quilts. I made this one for my oldest son when he was about 4 years old, and he loved Sesame Street. He loved Elmo. This quilt was used and dragged and thrown up on and everything. And when I pulled this out of my cedar chest yesterday to bring it, he's 21 years old, and his eyes lit up. He's like, "You still have that?" And so there is benefit. There is value. That's the word. Thank you. There is value in simple quilts. It doesn't have to be the showcase things. I think this is more loved, well, especially by him, than anything else I've ever made. So, all right. So this next series of quilts was kind of like my next venture into quilting. I didn't have a lot of money. I didn't have the money to go out to a quilt shop and just buy fabric. I had friends that would hand me their scraps. So I started making scrap quilts. I think if you know me, you can probably come and look closely and find bits of fabric that you had given me, because I literally chopped everything up. And this is one of the examples. This quilt is one of the quilts in my living room that my family uses when we watch TV. It's just loved and probably should have gone in the washer before I brought it today, but so that's an example of what I started to do when I didn't have the money to just go out and buy kits.
How big were those squares?
They were 1.5 inches and I finished at 1. Mm-hmm. Yep. And just random, and then I used bits and pieces of what I had for the sashing at the time. Here's another example of a scrap quilt that I did. I wanted to learn how to do, I think it's called string piecing. And so I just went to town with it. And then I also taught myself how to do paper piecing with this quilt. All of the flying geese are paper pieced. And it was where I learned that I am a process quilter. I enjoy the process. I enjoy the tedium. It just gives me those endorphin rushes to get one step further in my process. And this is another quilt on my couch that we cuddle up with when we watch movies. So here's another example. I actually had a good friend of mine when we very first started our quilt guild that taught us how to use men's shirts to make quilts. And so this one is made out of some of my husband's shirts, but we think we did an exchange as well. We exchanged pieces with each other. And I gave that to my husband that year for Christmas. And this one's well used. It's been washed many times, but
You can't see me. Higher.
higher.
Turn it that way.
Oh, so that everybody can see it well. Yeah. So this is a good example of, I didn't have to hardly buy any fabric at all for this one. It was just shirts that were cut up and sewn into something usable. All right, I have one more scrap quilt for you, and this one is I hang on my wall. I have a spot in my living room that's just a certain size, and so I exchange wall hangings. And this was one of the first time I used my Aunt Carmen, has a business. She sells the Easy Piecing Grid. and I was learning how to use it. So I designed this one, and it again is all scraps. And this is before I knew it was cool to do low volume backgrounds. I just had lots of whitish scraps, and I had colorful scraps. And so this is what ended up. Yeah. Sometimes in my scrap quilting, I didn't make anything fancy. My daughter needed another blanket on her bed, and instead of going to the store and buying a blanket, I did kind of a scrappy version of, I forgot, Jelly Roll quilt. Thank you, I forgot what it's called. Just end to end, all the 2.5-inch pieces that were like brightly colored, and that became the extra blanket on her bed. So sometimes they can be simple. It was fast, a lot faster than piecing it in smaller pieces. And she loves it. All right, so the next two together are kind of together. This is when it's kind of started getting a little bit more serious for me as a quilter, where I was trying different things. And actually, so there's two matching quilts. One's blue and one's red. My boys had twin beds. And my mom made the red one that's next, and I made the blue one. So they had kind of matching quilts. They were matching but different. The stars are applique. Yes, a machine applique for the stars. Yeah. So there's the blue version, and then there's the red version. And my mom, when she made the red version, she really likes scrappy. And so she kept trying to put other colors in there. I'm like, no, I want it really red. And so I started pulling the greens out of her pile and the blues. I'm like, no, I want it really red. And she's just like, okay. So anyway, so those were on my boys' beds when they had twin beds, when they were sharing the room. Oh, they need
2 steps up.
2 steps up.
So the camera can see you.
Okay.
Oh, well, now I know where to look, so now I know where to stand. That'll help.
There you go. Thank you, ladies. You're the best. The best.
So I don't know, look at what you've done.
So the next quilt, when they pull it out, is the very first time that I went to a fabric store and I bought the fabric for a quilt. I had never done that before. And I made this for my father-in-law, who's a really, really special person. And I actually went to his house yesterday and pulled it off his bed. So, yeah, this was the first time I'd ever just gone to the store and picked out fabric. And anyway, it was just an amazing, fun project. And I couldn't just make the Lone Star. I had to make little ones in the corner, and then I came up with my own ideas for the pieced borders. This is when I really kind of started getting my juices going as far as my quilting fun.
Did you machine quilt at all?
So machine quilting is not me. My mother is an extraordinary machine quilter, and so
Did you say her name?
her name is Shelley Day. Shelley Day. And so she gets all the credit. I have done some small things for myself, but nothing. I have not developed the talent that she does. And she's in Arizona right now, otherwise she'd be here. So that my next few quilts are when I started to kind of try applique. So this is a quilt that I made for my daughter. And my very first trying of applique was machine applique, and that's what this one is. And I had a lot of fun just kind of figuring out the flowers and the vines and where I wanted them.
Cheryl. 2 steps forward to show the camera.
I don't want to sit on her lap.
They like
It's okay, she can touch it. She can pet it if it's right in front of her. And this actually, I put it on the wall in my daughter's room. So it was the decoration in her room until she became a teenager and she decided she was too big for that.
She was too old for the flowers.
She was too old and she didn't want purple anymore. It was really fun. She's my only daughter, and so her room was all purple because that was my favorite colors. So now it's gray because that's what's cool for teenagers. So this next quilt that she's going to show is the first time I ever did needle turn applique, and I took a class from Bev Heineman. And so this is what I came up with from that class. And when I started, you can look carefully and you can see where I started because it's a little rough, but by the time I got to the end, I had a pretty good little technique going. And poor Bev, when we were taking that class, she saw what I had chose for my colors because my leaves were teal and, I just wanted something very different. And she just shrugged her shoulders and she just said, okay, whatever you like. She was very sweet. But this was fun for me. And after all that hand work, I had to hand quilt it. Just didn't make sense to me otherwise. So that's where I learned the needle turn applique. And I should have said this at the beginning. If you have questions, you can stop me. I'm just kind of going along, so feel free. So this is a funny story because this is another scrap quilt and it's ginormous. That's right. It's huge. It's huge. So I started this as a leader ender project because I thought, okay, I can cut all these little tumblers and have them in a little basket because that's a big deal. Bonnie Hunter tells you to do a leader ender. I hate leader enders. I learned this. It bothered me to extreme to have this unfinished project in the corner looking at me while I'm sewing something else. And so I learned really quick, leader ender projects aren't for me. And that's okay, right? I have a little piece of fabric that's been sewed on about 1 million times and that works for me instead. So yes, she asked, so then did you just finish the whole quilt? That's exactly what I did. I said, I'm not. So I just finished it and I got it done because I couldn't have it sitting there. I just couldn't do it. And the reason why I brought that and talked about that is because it's okay to decide you don't like something, right? Oh, so she asked, what is a leader ender project? So a lot of the times when you are, we'll get them later. A lot of the times when you do chain piecing, you put like a little scrap piece of fabric in to get you started so that the needle doesn't get gummed up. Well, a leader ender, you put like 2 pieces together and you sew that through. That's going to be like 2 of the tumblers. You do your chain piecing and then you put an ender in. So there's always something under your needle. So when you come back to chain piece again, does that make sense? That's a leader ender. I instead use a little scrap piece of fabric and it's been sewed on literally 1 million times to get started. That just is better for my brain. But okay, so these next couple quilts are when I started to try English paper piecing. This was my first one, and I think I cut the pieces out with a pair of scissors, the cardboard. I mean, I didn't buy anything. And then I went into the grandmother's flower garden, and I think I decided English paper piecing's not really my thing. That's okay, right? It's okay. I finished them. I tried it. I learned it. I get to decide if I want to do another one, maybe someday. Maybe if I didn't use such tiny pieces, right? I don't know why I like tiny pieces so much. Yeah. Well, let's see, what do I have next? Okay, so after English paper piecing, I actually really like this. This is one that I did, it's all hand pieced. So hand pieced all the pieces together, hand sewed everything together, the borders hand pieced. And I really like this. This is a technique I like. I need to do more of them. Sometimes I think I know how to do too many things. I don't have enough time to do them all. but this was really fun for me to try. And I totally just got this pattern out of one of the quilting magazines. I think it was no, I don't remember who the designer was, but okay, minis. I like little pieces. So I love paper piecing. I love paper piecing teeny tiny. I also like piecing teeny tiny without paper piecing. And so when I see something, sometimes I think, can I make it like a fourth of the size? And I scale them down. So these are some of my, it takes as much time or more than, some of these take as much time as a king size book would take you to sew because of all the little tiny seams. I have a cute little stand in my living room, and so I rotate them on that seasonally. They're fun for me. I don't need, she just asked what size are these. I never ever took a measuring tape to it. You can, I know. It's hard. It's hard. Yes. Oh. On the pineapple one? Yeah, she asked if I used paper on the, yes, this is paper pieced. This one's paper pieced, and the log cabin is paper pieced. This one is not paper pieced. This one I just cut little 1-inch half square triangles, and I was just really careful when I sewed them. Yeah. Not by hand. Nope. I use a sewing machine for all of those. And you just little tiny seam allowances. So this one that she's showing is actually the first time I ever tried using wool. And of course I had to just do a little one, but so I learned a lot from this little project with doing wool. I'm still learning about wool. That's something that's still something I'm learning about. Yes?
Do you find a certain stitch length is best for those minis?
So for the minis, I usually do a 1.5 stitch length, so it's small, and that keeps that seam stable, and it also perforates the paper often enough that it's really easy to pull the paper off. That's usually what I do. 1.5, sorry, 1.5 on my machine. I don't know what that equates to inches wise, but. So this one I used my aunt's easy piecing grid to help me with this one. And it started out, I had this certain number of these half square triangles left. I thought, well, I'm going to make a project with it. But when you do 1/2 inch finished, whatever you start with literally shrinks in half by the time you're done. And so I did that, and then I looked at it, I'm like, it was only about this big. And I'm like, that's really small, even for me. And so I thought, well, I've got some other scraps here. And so I made those into, anyway, it just kind of grew until I thought, okay, I'm done. But then I wanted to keep practicing my applique. And so I put just a simple applique little border on it, just for fun. Oh, people ask me how long things take. I don't keep track. It's sort of a labor of love, you know? Yeah, sorry. I wish I could tell you times, but. So I usually do work on one project at a time. Sometimes I have a hand project that I work on, and then I have something at my machine for those different times. But I usually, except for right now, because I have samples and things to make for Block of the Months, I don't count that, but my own personal projects, yeah. This was a fun quilt that I made, and I forgot the story about how I got it, but it was a kit from a quilt shop. I don't remember how I got it. My mom could probably tell you. But what was so fun about this is there was so much extra fabric that they gave me that I was able to make a second one, and I gave it to my mom. So there was so much fabric in the kit. We just had to do the border fabric. So that was fun for me. That's another funny little thing about me is I like to play, what's the right word? I like to play better than the designer on fabric, cutting and usage. I can always use less fabric than the designer tells me that I should. I like to save fabric. This next one that they're going to show is actually, it was kind of fun for me. It was the first time I bought a fat quarter bundle, and it was a Joe Morton fat quarter bundle, and I made a sampler quilt with it. And that was a fun experience for me because I'd never ever had used pre-cuts before that. One of the things that you'll notice actually for most of my quilts, I almost always do a pieced binding, and that's because until very recently I was scared of a big old binding, or sorry, I said binding, I meant border. I was scared of a big old border because my mom could tell stories of the waving borders on her quilting machine, and so I didn't want to mess it up. So the easy way to not mess it up is to just have a pieced border, right? Because you can measure that and you can make that just perfect. So my friend Lori taught me just very recently how to not be scared of putting a real border on a quilt. So she gets to be commended for that. Yeah. You guys are going to be tired. Sorry.
Oh, just be strong.
That's right. That's right. So this next one is actually one of my most favorite quilts, and I literally took it off my bed this morning. And I chose this quilt pattern. Okay. I chose this quilt pattern because I wanted to learn how to do Y seams. And if you want to learn how to do something, do it a whole bunch of times, right? Y seams. So Y seams are when you have 3 points coming in together. It's called a Y seam. And so you don't sew all the way to the end. You only sew to 1/4 of an inch to the end in all those pieces so that they come together. That's what a Y seam is. So all of these junctions where you have 3, I can't do it with two hands, when you have 3 come into the same point. And it's really not that difficult, but it takes practice. So it was super fun. Super fun for me. Okay, so a Y seam, like here's a Y seam. Here's a Y seam. In this case, it might be more than 3. But all of these points right here are Y seams where they come together. And you can't just sew all the way to the end. You have to stop at 1/4 of an inch. And then the next one comes and stops at that same point too. And then in the back, they're just all perfect. I use a pen and a measuring, I mark it with a pen. And so I know that I have to stop at that point. I'm sure there's people who can eyeball it. I don't trust myself that much, but yep. And when you have extra pieces to a quilt, you put it on the back, right? There's a little strip on the back of all my extra triangles. That's totally okay. You can piece your backs. You can add the extra pieces to make it, to use up what you have. That's how I know which way it needs to go on my bed. Because it has to run that way. My husband's been trained as well. Of course. It's hard to make everybody happy.
Whoops. My arms aren't long enough. You want the front or the back on the camera? Or no, we're too close. Yeah, I know, we gotta get this to.
Need the middle stripe.
Some up right here. Yeah. Okay.
There.
There we go.
Lots of people at home.
Patties you use?
Most of it is 80-20, like a cotton 80-20. Some of the quilts have some wool in it. Okay, so my next quilt is this is the one that I had in the fair this year. And I broke a lot of my fears with this. It has a lot of needle turn applique that I did one block at a time. I had one block and I had, sometimes I had it in my purse when I was taking kids. Sometimes it was by my chair at night. And this is the one I remember when I put this quilt together. Lori was sitting there and she taught me how to measure out my binding, I keep saying binding, I mean border. But I'd never done a scalped border before. And so if you want something and you've never done it before, guess what? Ladies, you just do it, right? You watch a video, you get a friend to teach you, and you just do it. And so I did some fun things with this one. I have a real border on it. And it took me about 2 years from start to finish this, just because of all the handwork. But it was a really fun process. But yes.
Is that flat or is that piping?
So the border has piping, and the only difference between a flange and a piping is the piping has the cording in it. But yeah. Somebody I think, was it Terry that said go to the fair? The fair is a really fun place. You see even here today, you can see so many things that other people have done, and you're like, I couldn't do that. But guess what? You can. You can. We live in an age where you can learn how to do anything. There's YouTube, you've got your friends, you go to a quilt guild. I've learned so many things from my quilter friends. There isn't anything that you can't learn how to do. No, my mother quilted this. It's machine quilted. Yeah. So this is the last thing I have to show you today, and it's my last project that I just finished. And I'm waiting for my mom to get back from Arizona to quilt it for me. So I wanted a little bit more experience with wool, and so this was my hand project with wool that I worked on. So soon I'm going to try stitches that aren't just blanket stitches with wool. That's what this one is mostly. But
Step forward. So wool
wool, you leave a raw edge with wool, and then you stitch it. There's different types of stitches that you can use. Right, so it does not have to be needle turned like cotton. Here, I move out of your way. So I look forward to my mom coming home, and as soon as she gets her other customers taken care of, then she'll put mine on. That's usually how it works. Some of you are like, yes, I'm waiting. Oh, thank you. That's right. So I do have a couple of other little things to show you. I don't have these quilts, but my aunt who does 10 Sisters Quilting has several books out, and I actually have sewn a lot of samples for her. So a lot of the quilts in these books I have sewn for her. And so I don't have them in my possession, but I sewed the one that's on the cover of this one for her. And I actually sewed the one on the cover for this one. She designed this one color-wise, and I did the sewing for her. Sometimes she sends me a bundle of fabric, and she says, how about it? Make something pretty with this. And sometimes she sends me things where she has a ton. I was going to just show you another one that I did. It's not a very big picture, but this was a really fun one that she just kind of let me do what I wanted, and she ended up putting it in her book. So I don't have those to show you, but that's something that I have spent a lot of time with as well. So I guess I have one more thing to show you at the very end, but what I hoped by showing you what I do is to inspire you to just do what you like. Try something new, see if you like it, learn something. If you don't like it, great. If you do, great. If what you like to do is Elmo quilts for your grandkids, then do Elmo quilts for your grandkids, right? If you want to learn how to do wool, then do wool. I think sometimes we get caught up in comparing ourselves to other quilters and thinking we have to make showpiece quilts, but whatever makes you happy, that's why you do this, right? You do it to make yourself happy. So I have one more story to tell you. You can always learn how to do something that you want to learn how to do. I am a firm believer in that. A few years ago, I wanted to learn how to knit. And so I went to this sweet lady that lived down the road from me who was a master knitter. And she sat down with me, and I didn't know what a knit stitch or a purl stitch was. I knew nothing about knitting. And after about an hour and a half with her, she kind of tapped my shoulder and she said, "Honey, I don't think knitting is for you." And it was really funny. She was trying to teach me how to make this, she called it a washcloth. It looked like a doily to me, but it was a round thing that she called a anyway. And I said, okay. And so I went home and I'm like, knitting is for me. Thank you very much. And so I tore it out and I tried again and I messed up again. I'm only supposed to have 10 stitches. How do I have 12? I don't even know. Tore it out, tried again. Eventually I made that darn washcloth. It was made. And with the help, I didn't ever go back to her for more help. But YouTube was my absolute best friend. Anytime I needed to learn how to make a stitch, YouTube was there for me, and they didn't tell me that I couldn't do it. So that's the last thing I want to show you. I know it's not quilting, but I really wanted to learn how to knit. And my knitting joy is making these little animals. And it brings me a lot of joy. And I get to make the little animals and I get to like pick out their clothes and I get to try new things. This one, I love this one. These fun textures in the dress. This little one has removable shoes. I mean, who wouldn't want to do this? Look at my little baby rabbit. Oh, I don't even know. Teddy bear. Anyway, this is just a small little basket of, guess what? I can knit, right? I can do it. I wanted to do it, and so I can do it. And so I guess that's what I want to leave with you guys, that whatever you want to do, you can do.
Can you show your quilts inside your basket?
This one right here?
What is that?
Oh, so I did not make this quilt. I can show the quilt, but my aunt made this quilt. She made this, I bet 20 years ago. One of my aunts made this. You're fine. I'll hold it. Yeah, anyway, fun stuff. Does anybody have any other questions for me?
Oh, you're back.
Oh, I always forget about this because it's sort of just my utility bag. This was just a Mondo bag. Mondo bag was the name of the pattern that I made out of scraps from that quilt that I made for my father-in-law. And this was my church bag for my kids. It's held up. This thing is 15 years old, and I used to carry books and Cheerios and all that kind of stuff. You can tell by the handle how much it's been used, but it's my hauling bag. So yeah.
And it's on your aunt's grid, right?
This one is, yeah. There's a Quilt Smart is the one who made up that pattern originally. If you're looking for that pattern, It's a Quilt Smart pattern. Yes,
On your quilt that has the wool on it, how do you care for that?
boy, this one right here that I just made. Boy, I don't know, Diantha. I don't usually, my couch quilts I throw in the washer just because they're family quilts, but all my other quilts that are my really nice bed quilts, I just do like the tub wash and then hang them out. So maybe someone that knows more about wool, dry clean. I haven't ever tried to wash a wool quilt, so I'm sorry.
Well, your wool is already washed, but it might bleed.
Gotcha.
That's the thing you're doing.
So maybe use Synthropol if you're doing it in your bathtub or dry clean. Okay. Sorry, I wish I was more knowledgeable about that for you. Anybody else? Well, thanks for letting me show you what I do.
Can we have her leave out her minis and